Hi everyone. Firstly, can I just say Happy New Year, because this is my first video of 2023 and it's nearly the end of January. And I haven't been doing videos for a while, not because I haven't been doing lots of exciting things. I've been quite busy in the background, but I've been researching an awful lot on imposter syndrome. And I was very compelled to do that because it's shown up a lot in the therapy room in 2023. I've had quite a number of clients coming in with it, not just corporate clients or people who work, and not just women, but people in relationships as well, interestingly. Why did I feel compelled to do so much research on it? Well, I really want to get into the guts of it so that we can understand it, how it presents, what it does to people, and how, most importantly, how we can actually try getting people into a place where they can start regulating their behavior around it and living the life they want to be living and doing the things they want to be doing in spite of it. It's one of those things that once an imposter, always an imposter, but it can be managed. It's like many things. So to say it can be totally beaten would be really to misrepresent what is possible. And I'll explain a little bit more about that in a moment. Firstly, exciting news. As a result of all of my research, I've decided to set up some workshops this year. There'll be all-day in-person events, and the first one is in Cricklade, and it's coming up on Saturday, the 20th of April, 2024. This is going to be purely for therapists, but other workshops will be for those of you that are personally having struggles with imposter syndrome. Therapists I want to work with, first of all, because I think it's one of the really difficult things to spot sometimes when somebody comes into the therapy room. We don't tend to look out for their imposter, and somebody might present with a whole plethora of quite upsetting conditions, and we may not instantly realise that it's been being driven by the imposter. If it is being driven by the imposter, we need to understand a little bit more about imposter syndrome, and we need to recognise it in ourselves too. So this day for the therapist is not just a process of how to manage people and help them through imposter syndrome, but it's a process of self-understanding, a journey for you guys as well. It's a great day. You will get so much out of it. And it's a great day for you to come along and discover on what level of the spectrum your own imposter feelings are, because believe it or not, some therapists present with this, not necessarily when they train to become therapists, but when they have to get out there and start running their own businesses. And I had my struggles with that too. Not to a huge extent, but to enough of an extent that I employed a business coach because I recognized I needed to get some help. And it was the best decision I ever made. And by the way, his name's Adam Brooks of Sales Academy. Just a little plug there if anyone's looking for a business coach or wants to increase their sales. So, imposter syndrome, what is it? It's basically shows up when there is an approval or achievement related task. And as I said earlier, it's on a spectrum. So some people will struggle to an extent, but they'll manage through. And others will just have the most horrific experiences with it on the other end of the spectrum. Some people will just avoid doing things. They will quit while they're ahead. Even though they're on the brink of success, they'll quit. They will wake up in abject terror every morning, terrified of what the day is going to bring. High anxiety. And not always does it present as anxiety. Sometimes it can get so ingrained that people get very, very depressed. And then on the really bad end of the spectrum, they can start turning to substance abuse, drugs and booze and things like that as a way of coping. And it's not good. You wouldn't believe when I say imposter syndrome that it could lead to that scale of impact on a person. But believe me, it does. And this is why I was so compelled to do my research into it. So what are the things I found out about imposters that are really, really interesting and things to be aware of if you are listening to this and you're recognizing that you may have an element of imposter syndrome? First, let's bust a myth around the imposter syndrome before we go any further. A lot of people think it's the what should I call it? It's the domain of women, that women struggle with it most. No. Men, women, it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't discriminate between cultures either, races, nothing like that. It can hit anyone, and it can hit at any time. So some people may be fantastically confident with their job and be really, really petrified in relationships, building friendships, family dynamics, all of that stuff, sheer terror. Whereas some people will have a really successful family life and yet struggle immensely in their working life. And interestingly, they may hide it. You may not necessarily know that they were struggling with it. Those closest to them might, but your work colleagues might not necessarily understand it. So this is why for this workshop, I'm extending this invite to leaders as well. Any leaders out there, or HR specialists, or anyone, coaches, anyone that helps people with imposter syndrome. If you want to really understand it and how it develops and how to help people combat it, then this workshop is definitely for you, because there are exercises aplenty. There are solution-focused questions you can use. You get a whole toolkit to help you to understand how to get into the guts of it and help someone else who's struggling with it, and understand what's driving you and what's motivating you to do things the way you're doing them. So what have I discovered? Well, first thing is that imposters set excessively high standards for themselves. Their expectations are off the scale in terms of being unrealistic. And I've done previous videos. I will put them in the comments below on YouTube, in the same way I will put in the comments the Eventbrite link to the event. But the people will absolutely set ridiculously high standards for themselves. I did another video, which I will link for you too, which was all about what's your default mode, high expectations or acceptance. And that plays a huge part into this, into imposter syndrome, those unrealistic expectations. And coupled with that is this sense of an developed sense of responsibility for everyone and everything and every outcome. It's a really overdeveloped sense of responsibility. The biggest thing is the fear of failure. Showing any vulnerability, the fear of failure is the thing that imposters fear absolutely the most. And this belief, the other key thing I discovered is this belief that they need to be on it 24/7. Yeah, so in every situation. So you walk into a social situation and you feel you don't fit in, you're the problem. It might be that you've walked into a situation with people who just aren't your tribe, who aren't like-minded. But that's not the problem. The problem's you, because you don't fit in. And this is a common problem for a lot of us anyway, who really can say they really enjoy networking events, unless they are a really gregarious type of person. Most people don't, and that's why, because they're just like, oh, it leaves me cold. It's the wrong environment. So maybe networking events aren't for you, or maybe a different type of networking event is for you. But no, with imposters, the problem is me. So there are two key things that avoiders do. They'll have one of two coping mechanisms. They will either overwork, and some people overwork to the most ridiculous level, where they would rather pee off their family and give up their social groups, their friends and everything at the expense of a job, because they don't feel they're good enough. So they will overwork. They don't get success from this. And the number one reason they don't get success from this is because they keep moving the goalposts. So they achieve something, they feel it could have been better. And so the goalpost has been moved and the expectation has been set higher, and it becomes like an addictive drug that can never be satisfied. And we talk about a lot of how this pans out in the workshop. The other thing they do, they either overwork or they go to avoidance. So the fear of failure is so great with avoidance that you'd rather do anything else from which you get, even put laundry on or do ironing, seriously. You'd rather do anything else than the task in hand because you know it won't be perfect from the get-go. And you'd rather, to avoid looking vulnerable, you will avoid it. You cannot appear to others to show any vulnerability. So you will avoid doing it, leave it to the last minute, rush to do it, make out you're really busy. And people that say to me, I work well under pressure, that's always sets off warning bells in my head. And I think we got an avoider. And avoiders are the ones who will then go to at the extreme end of the spectrum. It's complete self-sabotage we're talking about. Quitting. They would rather quit and be known for being lazy than show any vulnerability. It's a horrible, horrible place to be. So very briefly, where does all this shizzle come from then? How the hell do we develop imposter syndrome? Because we're not born with it. It's not a condition that we're born with. But it is difficult to get it under control. But once you have, and you've mastered it, fabulous. And I'd urge you to watch my video on the healing journey, because that will help make a lot more sense if you watch that video in conjunction with this, because you need to be on a certain level on the healing journey. And that needs to be at self-mastery. And you're not there yet if you're an imposter. But this comes from two things. It's quite simple, straightforward, but not easy. Nature and nurture. So let's kick off nature first. If you are a worrier, prone to worrying, you find it difficult to say no, so you're a bit of a people pleaser, and you are a perfectionist as well. If you've got perfectionist tendencies, you are far more likely to struggle with imposter feelings than most other people. Doesn't say that others don't, but you are far more likely to struggle. And the problem with that, it's coupled with your nurture, your upbringing. And the two are not mutually exclusive. Each has an impact on the other. I could spend a whole day talking about upbringings and belief systems and how they're developed, and we cover an awful lot of this in the workshop. But if you think about it like this, when you are a little kid, you're hardwired to seek approval from your parents, your social groups, your teachers, your friends, everybody. And as you become an adolescent, then you're really hardwired to impress your peer groups. And you don't give a damn what your parents think at a certain age, do you? You just want to impress your peer group. But so you will believe what they tell you, basically. So if your parents tell you the sky is blue or a daffodil is yellow, you don't question it. You don't go and Google it, do you? You just think, oh, right, a daffodil's yellow, the sky is blue. And also in family dynamics, certain things can happen in family dynamics in terms of the way success is, what's the word I'm looking for? The way success is rewarded or respected within your family dynamic. So, for example, I've known of clients who've said that, you know, they were very naturally bright as a kid. And because they were very successful at school, their parents didn't give them a lot of feedback because they didn't want them to become arrogant. Well, we need a bit of balance here because no feedback is not good for a kid. And when you're a little kid, you just want to fit in. You just want to believe and go along with the family dynamic. So if somebody says you're lazy or you're great or we don't want you to become arrogant, you'll think, oh, well, if I, blow my own trumpet, that's arrogant. And we go into this in a bit more detail on the workshop. Are you arrogant? What's the difference between confidence and arrogance? It's an interesting question. I'll leave that one with you. I'm not here to debate that today. But this does, for some children, irreparable damage as they get into adulthood because they carry this belief system with them and they truly believe what they've been told. And it's not because parents are bad people. But parents unwittingly do stuff to try and get their kids to maintain a bit of balance and control with their kids. And let's be clear, when you're a little kid as well, your brain, your prefrontal cortex hasn't properly developed. So that your emotional primitive brain has, but this prefrontal cortex, or the logic and reasoning, doesn't develop till we're about age 25. Right, so that explains why kids go off and do the most ridiculous things sometimes, and parents are trying to work out what the hell's going on. But the thing about that is you haven't developed the ability at a young age to discern whether your parent or whoever has made that judgment about you has actually got good judgment. So these beliefs are so instilled, and beliefs are very difficult to change, which is why I said at the beginning, this isn't an easy fix. Yeah, it's not. It requires a little bit more in-depth work to be able to get into that belief system and make beliefs that are more appropriate and more based in fact, rather than some judgment that was placed on you as a child, which was totally out of context. So how else can we help people with imposter syndrome? And how can you help yourself if you are struggling with it? The first thing you need to do is start being far more compassionate with yourself. Self-compassion is really, really important. Stop beating yourself up. Think about the advice you would give a best friend, because you wouldn't speak to a best friend the way you speak to yourself. Someone you love, admire, and respect. How would you advise them if they were in the position you are in now? Look at your values. You know, when you understand your values and what motivates you, what makes you tick, it gives you a really good basis for judging whether situations, people, things are right, because no relationship is going to survive or be without its very rocky road if your basic value systems aren't aligned. You can have a lot in common, but if you don't share the same values, it's not good. So understanding your values is really important. So what do I mean by values? Well, I mean things that are important to you. I can tell you some of mine off the top of my head. I like honesty. I like forthrightness. I can't stand bullshit. I like people to be authentic. I can handle the truth. I can't handle wishy-washy BS. Integrity is really important to me. So what's important to you? They might be different for other people. It's compassion, it's connection. What are your values? Get really clear on what really matters to you, because when you're clear on that, it gives you a really, really good roadmap for assessing situations, people, things, as I said earlier. Perfectionism. Watch out for it. Are you a perfectionist? Because if you are, sorry to burst your bubble and pee all over your parade today, but perfection doesn't exist. So just take that in for a minute. No, it doesn't. There's no such thing as perfection. So what you are, there you go, a really, really ridiculously unrealistic expectation to achieve perfection is not possible, because you're a human being, first and foremost. And the final thing is, don't fear failure. You know, life isn't linear. We haven't got a little graph that has our age going up on one axis here and our life experience going there, that goes, woo, nice linear line. It just goes up and up, and everything gets great and great and great, and we're much, much better as we get older. And then poof, all of a sudden, we pop our clogs. It doesn't work like that. Life is a roller coaster. And what imposters do is try to avoid the troughs. But it's in those troughs that you find your greatest teaching, learning, experience. Experience isn't innate. Success isn't innate. Think of a musician, a really talented musician. Yeah, for sure, they may have had a talent, but they didn't get where they were by not practicing every day. And this is the same with anything that you may be attempting that you're not great at yet. You're going to have to practice, and you might make some mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes as long as we learn from them. Making the same mistakes again and again is a problem, but learning from those mistakes is the key. And in those troughs, when you're going down on the roller coaster ride and you're having to claw your way back up, you're building resilience. The resilience to carry on regardless of failure. And that's what makes us successful, not trying to maintain a wave at a high with a totally unrealistic expectation on ourselves. Just remember these two things. Firstly, we are all work in progress. None of us are getting it right day in, day out. We are all work in progress. And secondly, don't forget what a little legend you really are. And on that note, I'm going to say bye-bye for now, my darlings. Take good care out there. Sending you lots of love. And I hope to see some of you on our event in April or at a future one if you're struggling. I will be in touch. But for now, bye-bye, little loves, and take care.